So how many people here, by show of hands, know that TxDOT does more than highways? Okay, that's pretty good. You would be excused, okay, if you didn't know that because of the wonderful highway system here. If you travel anywhere else in the country, and I'm looking at you, California, the highways are not in good condition. TxDOT has wonderful highways, and every time one of my engineer friends comes here to visit, they marvel at these soaring interchanges and can't believe how well the roads are maintained here. So you would certainly, I would give you a pass if you didn't know that. But in fact, TxDOT does a lot more than highways. And we've got two people on the panel here today. They're going to tell you a little bit about that. So first, let me introduce Caroline. So Caroline Mays, AICP. She is the Director of Planning and Modal Programs at TxDOT. And in this role, she's responsible for management and control of everything but highways, basically. So this is aviation, maritime, public transportation, rail, and transportation planning and programming divisions. She's a recognized regional, state, and national leader, experienced in multimodal transportation planning and programming, policy, and project development. Mays joined TxDOT in late 2012 and has held several positions, including statewide freight coordinator, freight planning branch manager, director of freight and international trade / border section, and director of freight, trade, and connectivity. So she knows a lot about freight and logistics. She was responsible for TxDOT's statewide multimodal freight, international trade, and statewide corridor planning programs, and she was also instrumental in establishing the multimodal freight planning program here in Texas, developing the first multimodal freight mobility plan and the Texas-Mexico Border Transportation Master Plan. So, Caroline Mays.
Good afternoon. Okay, that is not strong because it seems like you guys are about to fall asleep. I see some of you with coffee, so let me try again. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Okay, much better. So you're excited to be here like I am. So thank you again, Peter, and the board members for the invitation. One, inviting us, TxDOT, to be part of this. I know Jeff has been part of this for many, many years, so we're really, really excited to come and share with you. And like Joe mentioned, we're not just about highways, although that's what we're very well known for. We're actually responsible for a lot more than highways. So I'll go through my presentation and kind of show you. This is TxDOT today. A lot of you know this, but I just wanted to kind of set the context. We're governed by a 5-member board. We have, right now, I think actually over 1,300 employees. A majority of that is in the 25 districts. And then also we have 34 divisions, which are centralized, primarily in Austin. And the way divisions work is, they work throughout the state. So that's a really key context, for a lot of people to understand that. A lot of our program deliveries at the district, but a lot of the other stuff, divisions, are very involved in that as well. So structurally, this is our organizational chart, and this is fairly recent. And what I want to draw your attention to, we have commission. A lot of people know them as the board members, but ours is called a commission, and then our executive director, Mark Williams, and then under Mark Williams, there's 3 lieutenants. He has 2 deputy executive directors, and then a chief engineer that really focuses primarily on district operations. And then under the 2 executive directors, Brian Barth is over program delivery, so it has several divisions, and that's more on the right-hand side from your end. And then the planning and some of the other support services are on the left-hand side. And I'm not sure I can get this, wanted to show you, but the planning and modal programs, 3 years ago, the position was created that really, consolidated, but also provided a lot of visibility and emphasis for multimodal, programs within TxDOT. So under my umbrella, I oversee Rail Division. You hear Jeff talk about later, Maritime Division, Aviation Division, Public Transit Division, and then Transportation Planning and Programming Division. That's kind of the highway side. They do a lot of the highway planning, and then the programming. When you hear about UTP, that is under the Transportation Planning and Programming Division. So really, yeah, I cover all gamuts of stuff. 1 minute we're talking about corridor studies, which is primarily highways, and then the next minute we're talking about corridor ID, When it comes to transit, we're talking about maritime, corridors as well. So it's really just making sure that we integrate all of those. So here, quickly to show you the 5 divisions that I mentioned, you have aviation, maritime, rail, public transportation, and transportation planning and programming. And as you can see, the core function really is, how do we shepherd and how do we emphasize and integrate multimodal planning and programming. All of those divisions, they have some type of project development going on in those divisions. We recently, in the last session, the legislators gave us about $900 million for Texas ports. So that division, the Maritime division, is actually working with the ports and with other stakeholders to execute on those funding and projects. So a lot of project development. Jeff will talk a little bit later, a lot of project development in the rail division, and all the other divisions have some type of project development. But then they also have a lot of other functions, as you can see this, and I'll highlight some of them. Funding and grant management, a lot of the divisions manage pass-through grants. For instance, public transportation and aviation division, they get state and federal funds, and they literally just pass through to the different stakeholders throughout the states. In the case of aviation, 289 plus general aviation airports that get a lot of their funding through TxDOT to be able to maintain the airports, runways, to different elements of the airports. A huge part of this, this divisions is advisory committees. I think under my umbrella, there's 7 different advisory committees. The legislators may be creating another one. But from public transit to freight to border trade to corridor, bicycle and pedestrian, transit advisory committee, you name it, there's a whole gamut. And really the goal of those advisory committees is to engage grassroots throughout the state on those key issues, and also to help really inform TxDOT on what matters and the priorities. So I'll walk through each of these divisions quickly. So this is aviation division, I mentioned already. Their key responsibility is they develop the Texas Airport Systems Plan, and the plan really, again, focuses on general aviation airport. You will not see DFW or Dallas Love, because those are the bigger airports. They generally deal directly with the federal government. They don't need us to pass through any of the programs. The Aviation Capital Improvement Program, this is where I mentioned we get both federal and state dollars. And then that is, we have to develop the capital improvement program. So that's how a lot of the aviation airports get their funding. Big part of the division, we actually do have a state aircraft fleet that we use to fly primarily elected officials, the governor, lieutenant governor, all kinds of folks. And then we also use it for our own purposes, to travel throughout the state of Texas to do only state business. We did not rent this aircraft to private sector. So a lot of times people ask me, I said, no, we can't. That's not the role of the state aircraft fleet. And then a big thing that we've, recently, gotten into is you see UAS, or drone program. A lot of people know that by that. Internal TxDOT has quickly really scaled our drone program, and we are training, drone pilots. This is existing TxDOT staff, training them in using drones to do different things, from inspecting bridges to collecting data, or inspecting, mapping right away, inspecting a lot of Jeff's people. They use that to inspect rail tracks. So you're seeing that really upskilling existing TxDOT staff. A bridge inspector that used to go crawl underneath bridges now can just use drones to fly and be able to process that information. I saw data recently that showed compared to physical versus using drones is like 86% in time saved by us using the drones to go and inspect a bridge. It was just astronomical, the efficiency that is gained. And then the data can be used and shared with many, many folks within the department. And then when it comes to Maritime Division, this is one of the younger divisions within TxDOT. This division was created around 2012, 2013 when I came on board, but it's become a very significant division within the agency. A lot of visibility with the legislators because of the significance of the ports. And during COVID, I think all of us can attest that we learned a lot about supply chains, and logistics, and it really has become a huge program. And there, again, they developed a port access program. They have the ship channel improvement program that they also manage, a land port connectivity, looking at roadways that connects to the Texas seaports. And then TxDOT is a non-federal sponsor for the Gulf Intercoastal Waterway, a huge part of our role because yes, the feds oversee that, but TxDOT is a big sponsor. Then we have a Port Advisory Committee. Then the next division is Public Transportation Division, less known. Some of you here may know, but a lot of people, when I took over this role, and a lot of times they were asking me, does TxDOT have a public transit division? I'm like, yes, we do. Actually, it's been in existence for a long time. And as you can see, this is their role. The planning side of this division, it's fairly recent where they've retooled themselves. The division was primarily a grant management division. It didn't do a lot of planning to really be able to drive transit planning, but also transit implementation look like. A lot of work in bike and ped activities. And one thing that this division is doing right now, some of you may have been involved, they're developing the first statewide transit plan. I'll talk about a little bit later. But they're also developing the statewide active transportation plan, the first time that TxDOT is looking at both of these key issues at a statewide level. And this division has two advisory committees, Bike Ped Advisory Committee and the Public Transit Advisory Committee. This is Jeff. I won't steal his thunder, but Rail Division has been at TxDOT for quite a bit, and they're unique because they look at both passenger rail and freight rail. So Jeff will talk about a lot of this later in his component. Then the last division, which is Transportation Planning and Programming Division, this is, they do multimodal planning. This is where freight is housed, this is where corridor planning is housed, this is where long-range planning is housed, this is where the famous UTP, right now we're in the middle of that. This is the 10-year programming document that lays out, our 10-year funding program for the state. And this is where, I mentioned border planning is housed, and many other MPO, data management. If you got data from TxDOT, it probably came from this division. Again, I call this division kind of the octopus of the agency. Literally, like everything revolves around that division in order to really drive some of the policy decisions that TxDOT makes in many cases. And then just, wanted to show, when I took this position, my executive director asked me, okay, how does all of this fit together? We have so many things going on. How do we make sense out of it? So my team helped create this slide, which is really important and unique. If anything you can take away, from my presentation today is really this. Why do we do the planning that we do? How does it integrate broadly within the broader context of our agency? How does it drive decisions? So from the bottom, I mentioned we have numerous advisory committees. And this advisory committees, these are volunteers that come and really spend their time with us. Some of the committees meet 4 times a year. Some of them meet much more frequent. And you got different gamuts, like the Border Trade Advisory Committee is chaired by the Texas Secretary of State, so to that level. And you have all the border communities, and then you go to, let's say, the I-27 Advisory Committee is, all the membership along that corridor participate in that. And really that helped to drive what you see here when you see the cross-cutting plans. These are plans that look at both passenger and freight. So for instance, the rail plan that I mentioned, that looks both at freight, rail, and passenger. And then, let's say, the border master plan, that also looks at both the movement of goods and the movement of people. And then, kind of in the top middle, you see one side is really focusing on the plans that move people, and that's what I mentioned, where you see bicycle and pedestrian plan is being developed right now, and then also the statewide multimodal transit plan is being developed right now. On the goods movement side, we've done a fairly decent job over the years to be able to develop those plans, to focus a lot of emphasis on those areas. And you see a lot of integration within the department, less so on the passenger side, but I think we're making some progress there. And then really all of that rolls into our statewide transportation, long-range transportation plan, and that plan really drives what you see in the UTP that ends up being in the tip. But it also reflects TxDOT agency, plan. The agency strategic plan is more an operational plan, but it does have goals such as safety, economic development, mobility, connectivity is all in our strategic plan, but it drives, really the long-range plan is where you have the transportation-specific goals, but all of this are aligned. This is kind of how the sausage is made at TxDOT. Before you see any projects being let, it would have gone through one of these, processes here. And then, again, why did we consolidate? Why, emphasis on multimodal at TxDOT? Really, a couple of things, to ensure that we continue to facilitate multimodal movement of people and goods. We need all the modes, and I can tell you from the freight side, freight moves by all modes: trucking, rail, water, pipeline. So really, when you look at that, is a key consideration. Same thing with people. Okay, when I've been reviewing, yesterday I was reviewing the executive summary for the statewide active transportation plan. A lot of last mile trips. Imagine you parked in the garage. How did you get up here? You walked. If you go to a shopping center, you go to a mall, you go to your job, you park and you walk. So really walking is a huge last mile. Imagine if we didn't have the facilities that you can walk from where you parked your car to your final destination. So I think a lot of people don't think about that. So I was reading that, I was like, yeah, this is a thing we need to tell about a story, that we need all the modes. The sidewalks are important, trails are important, transit is important, highways are important, all of them are important, rail is important. So when you look at it, you gotta look at it holistically. And I think that's what we've been trying to really do. And how do we best integrate that within TxDOT efforts? So highways, where do buses run? Buses run on highways. So we need to think about how do we integrate and consider buses on our corridors that buses operate in, to ensure that we have connectivity, we have sidewalks, that we've timed those lights correctly. So if somebody's trying to run from the other side when they see the bus coming, that they can be able to cross safely. So a lot of that again, and then really a key component of that is to support the state's continued economic competitiveness. The state is growing very fast. We're at over 31 million people today, and we're projecting that to be anywhere from 45 to 50 million people by 2050, 2060 timeline. So really being able to do that. And then the last thing, really, our goal is as TxDOT to be a convener. I showed you all the advisory committees that we do, and many of my team are on the road engaging stakeholders throughout the state, and really that's a key goal for us, is to be a convener, to bring people together, to be able to have those dialogues that really helps drive some of the policies and decisions that are made. So want to answer questions right now? I'll let Jeff go, then I'm going to come back, and then we'll definitely have questions after that. Joey's gonna...
Thank you, Caroline. See, I told you. TxDOT does a lot more than just highways. It's now my pleasure to introduce you to Jeff Davis, who is the Rail Division Director. Jeff and I sit on the Texas Passenger Rail Advisory Committee with a lot of other people who are much smarter than I will ever be at this business, and it's a pleasure to serve with him. Jeff has decades of both public and private sector. I think there's some friends of mine in the room here who have done that, gone across the fence a few times. He's got decades of both public and private sector experience in transit and passenger and freight rail planning, maintenance, operations, and executive leadership. His previous experience includes serving in leadership roles for the South Carolina Public Railways, a division of the South Carolina Department of Commerce, which operated the Port Utilities Commission of Charleston, Port Terminal Railroad, and the East Cooper and Berkeley Railroad. He served as head of the mechanical department and was promoted to manager of operations and regulatory affairs. He's also held leadership positions with CSX, one of the large Class I freight railroads that we all know and love here in the United States, serving as the manager of labor relations and as the terminal train master in New Orleans. So I'd like to introduce Jeff Davis.
Thank you, Joe. You can thank me because that was considerably shorter than it was last year. And first of all, I always like to start off by thanking the folks of the Rail Division, all the women and men that really make the Rail Division work. So don't worry, Chad Coburn is here. For as everyone knows, I can't answer anything he does, so Chad. And then I just want to point out Alyssa Greenberg, who's with our Federal Legislative Affairs, to make sure I don't say anything wrong. Now, traditionally, I used to be last, and now I'm first, and they made my boss sit next to me, so apparently I have done something horribly wrong in the past. So I will try to be a good government employee and say nothing. All right. So I'm just going to kind of talk about what the high-level stuff that I think most people are interested in, and one is the Presidio Rail Facility. So believe it or not, we have walls, 4 of them. Now, it doesn't have a roof, but we do have walls. So that's progress. And I know many of you have been talking about Presidio for many, many years, and we're finally making some good progress, thanks to Chad and his group over there for getting this done. So we are in the process of doing that. We hope to have it completed by the end of the year, but there's no hope. We have to have it done by the end of the year. We have FHWA and COVID funding, COVID relief funding, so that funding expires at the end of the year, so we really need to make sure we get this thing done. So we've partnered with Texas Pacifico, who's the operator of the line, and again, we're making some tremendous progress. And when it opens, we anticipate having over $1 billion worth of commerce come across the border, so we're looking forward to that. Oh, all right. So the legislature has been hard at work. Rail division's never, I said everything in Texas is big except the rail division budget. Well, we finally actually have a budget. So we have $350 million in local grade separations for railroad crossings. Now that's more the road and railroad than it is rail, but we'll take it. We hope that the legislature will pass this. It's in the House and the Senate bills. We hope that they'll come together here soon and give us $350 million. To tell you how important it is to them, we requested 175, and the Lieutenant Governor bumped it up to 350. We anticipate doing about 10 projects based on cost estimates that we have for off-system roads. So about half of all the on-system roads for Texas are already grade separated. The balance of those may or may not need it, but we have a pretty good strategy in place to handle on-system roads. The issues, the off-system roads, where very few are grade separated. So this $350 million will allow municipalities and counties to come to TxDOT, apply for grants, and then TxDOT, we would issue those grants, and the projects would be let by TxDOT. So again, we hope to get about 10 projects out the door in the next 5 years, and that will also be, they're not going to all be in Houston and not all be in Dallas. It will be separated or equitably pushed across the state. So there will be rural areas that will benefit from this as well. All right, the state rail plan. I'm not going to say a word about it because Kevin Keller is got a whole time dedicated to talk about the state rail plan, so I didn't want to take his thunder from him, but he's the author of the plan, or the administrator of the plan. We've worked real close with him, and he'll tell you everything you need to know about the state rail plan. It is published, and we thanks for all those that participated in putting information into the program. All right, as Caroline was saying, we're talking about population growth. Why do we need rail in the state or other forms of transportation? I'm probably not allowed to say this, but we say modes, not roads. Yeah, well, okay, that's why she's sitting next to me. So as you can see, the population growth is there, and I think Caroline's got a slide on this, and she'll talk better about it than I can, but that Texas Triangle is really the growth that we see in Texas. So we, as a planning group in rail, we are certainly looking at alternative modes of transportation, specifically rail, and how we can get around that triangle and move people and not get on the highway system. All right, so this is just some statistics, and again, Caroline, I think will go over this better than I can, but you can see that 66 of the Texas 254 counties are in that triangle, 75% of the population growth in 2022, and 91% of the Texas population in those years are in that Texas triangle. So we cannot continue to build roads to get out of the congestion that we have. So we are looking at other forms, and again, rail, I think, is a solution to that. Here's just more statistics. Who cares about statistics? But there's big numbers in there, right? $13 billion in annual cost of congestion of people sitting on the roads, and 65% of the state population. As big as Texas is, 65% of the population's in that triangle. And you can see, I thought this was an interesting statistic, though. There was 172% of registered vehicles in the last 4 decades. However, there's only been 19% highway capacity and growth. So you can see they don't coincide. So we absolutely have to look at other modes. All right, the Corridor ID program. So that was a federal grant that the FRA administered. We applied for, we received 2 grants, one for a corridor study between Dallas and Houston, and another one between Houston and Fort Worth. We've completed the first phase of that. It is with the FRA. However, all federal loans are under administrative review. Now, what does that mean? I have no idea. It's with the federal government. They're reviewing it. As everyone knows, there's a pause on most federal grants. So this has one that has also been paused. And as soon as they release that, we should move forward with the service development plan and looking at those 2 legs. And these are just a list of all the corridor ID programs that were granted in the state of Texas. So there's several. As you can see, we have 2, and we signed letters of support for most of these. We're also looking at what we call the Judge Brown study. I know Judge Brown was here last year. So Judge Brown has asked us, let me back up. So the next NOFO that comes out for the CID program, we'll look to apply from from Dallas to San Antonio. But in the interim, Judge Brown has asked us to look from Austin to San Antonio. So we are currently conducting a study on what it would take to improve the current UP corridor and alternative routes. And you can see this alternative route that kind of goes down 7110 and back in to potentially move UPs through freight off of that and get it out of the I-35 corridor. Obviously, they still need to run their local trains, but we would look at, again, an alternative corridor to free up the I-35 corridor for potential passenger service. This is a study that he's asked us to do, and we're in the process of doing that. And we can ask Chad when it's going to be done. I think it should be done maybe by the end of the year. So those are some other planning things we're looking at, and I think that is it from me, and then it's back over to Caroline.
Yes, I appreciate that. Clapping for Jeff. Jeff has a lot of work cut out for him. One thing he didn't mention, Jeff supports a lot of highway projects that have rail components. So he's not just a rail guy, he's for a lot of districts, they call him when there's a project that has rail issues, the agreements that Texas has to have with the railroads for different kinds of projects. Jeff's team spend a lot of time on that. So really appreciate Jeff and the team in the rail division. And some of you, I don't know if there's transit agencies here, they also run this safety oversight that's required as well. So they spend a lot of time with some of the transit agencies and the freight railroads. So I am excited to talk to you about the first ever, I'll call it first ever. Some people say, no, we've done some components. I say, no, we've never packaged a statewide transit plan as TxDOT or as the state of Texas. So Eric Gleason, the division director, wasn't able to be here. So I have the pleasure of presenting this to you today. So we kicked off this plan probably somewhere around 2023, and I'll show that later. But really, the team wanted me to highlight why transit is important. So the first couple of slides is really to set the context, but also to provide a business case for transit. So as you can see here, transit helps Texas thrive, okay? I think the statistics before COVID, it was like 277 million trips were taken in by transit trips in the state of Texas. That was, quite a bit. Even during COVID, I think there was still like 177 million trips taken by transit in Texas. So transit fuels our economy. You guys are in this region. I call it the transit region, probably one of the best transit regions in the state of Texas. Then you have Austin, you have San Antonio, you have Houston, but here you have several transit agencies, that of course being the centerpiece of that, and as you can see, a lot of transit-oriented development, and that really helps the local tax base. I grew up in a city that had a lot of transit, and you can imagine the transit-oriented development because, proximity to transit allows for employees, but also allows for people that really want to live in a much more dense urban community to choose those communities. And then transit support workers, a huge part of the Texas economy, and the employees that go to a lot of these jobs, whether it's a warehousing job or it's a job downtown, transit are a key component of that. So imagine one day we shut down transit. Some of these folks will not be able to get to a job. And I always like to share this. Walmart has a very new distribution center in South Dallas, the inland port. When they built it, and they're offering $35 an hour for a warehouse worker, and they cannot find people. You know what the number one issue was? Transportation. People would show up to work for a week or 2 weeks, and then they drop off because the cost of transportation. And actually, South Dallas Inland Port has been working with DART to see how they can expand the bus service to be able to serve not just Walmart. So many warehousing distribution centers are moved down there, and certainly the limitation or the barrier to accessing those jobs is transportation, probably a biggest cost for a lot of employees, the blue-collar workers and others. So transit really is key to Texas' continued success and economic development. Transit gives Texans options, and again, a lot of times I tell my team, a lot of the wrong narrative that transit is for poor people. Again, I grew up in the Northeast, okay? You go in Washington, D.C., New York City subway, people work downtown. They are taking the train because that's the best option. Women have their sneakers on and they have the nice shoes in their bag, and they get on that train, they jump on that, and they walk to the job. So it's not for poor people, okay? Transit in those cities, how many of you have been in Washington, D.C.? Wow, yeah. And how many have been in New York City? Yeah. Because try driving in New York City or try driving in Washington, D.C., the congestion, and then how much you're going to spend to park, okay? I lived in New York, and it was, you go to park downtown, it's $50 an hour, okay? So imagine if you go for a meeting and you're there for 8 hours, it's not economical to be able to drive, but the congestion as well. So again, that mindset, we need to think about it. Jeff talked about the Texas Triangle. 70% of the population lives in this region, and let me tell you, 100% of the corporate relocation are relocating in the Texas Triangle. And there's, I think, 54 of them literally in the last, 3 to 5 years that are relocated here, including, Toyota, Tesla, many others, just to name a few that are located within the Texas Triangle. So again, perfect storm. You have a consolidation of all the corporate relocations in the Texas Triangle from Houston to Austin, San Antonio, Dallas, Fort Worth, but also the demographics. Guess where people go? People go where jobs are. This is where the jobs are. This is why people are coming here, because they're looking for economic opportunity. So you have people moving here, but also I mentioned, some of the big institutions in Texas are all within the Texas Triangle. Think about it. A&M, UT, UNT, you name, all of them are within this. So imagine the amount of the student population alone that are in this Texas Triangle. Some of the major airports are all within this Texas Triangle. So you have people traveling, crisscrossing left and right. So really it's a perfect storm. And guess where most of the congestion is? All of the congestion is in the Texas Triangle, in the cities within the Texas Triangle. So what role can transit play? You saw this from Jeff. But as you can see, what I wanted to point out here is really the limited inner city and rail coverage, okay? Limited. If you want to take a train today to Austin, it could take you 6 hours on Amtrak. That is not viable. You can drive faster than that, but if you get stuck in congestion, that could be a different story. So that's kind of what we're really dealing with, you know, when it comes to transit. So really quickly, you know, how do we integrate multimodal transit into the system? And here it really summarizes all of the different, you know, not just the transit system, but all the other modes. And again, here we're trying to show folks that it has to be holistic. It has to be integrated. We have to look at all the options. It's not one versus the other. You know, where if you spend money on transit, it doesn't take away from highways. Spend money on highways, it doesn't take away from the other modes, and they all kind of have to work together. So this really what this slide is showing is the vast, diverse, but also very comprehensive network of multimodal transportation system in the state of Texas. So for the transit plan, this is the vision for the transit plan, and I just want to highlight a couple of things there. Integrated network is a key one. Mobility options for people, this is why this is really important, but seamless as well. We want to make sure that this is seamless, that you can move from one transit system to the other, or you can move from one mode to the other. You can go to a park and ride and jump on a train, you know, but also local, regional, and across the state. You know, transit is not just urban issues. Transit is actually a rural issue. You know, I'll talk a little bit about that. A lot of people in the rural areas actually depend on transit, and there is even much more important, because think about a veteran that lives 100 miles from a VA hospital, cannot drive. The only option they have is transit. You know, so those are some of the things a lot of people, and then people that, you know, live and work in the rural areas, they also do need transit because they may not have a vehicle. If they have a vehicle, they have some type of disability, then they cannot drive. So this is the process that we used to develop the plan. Really a huge part of it was fact-finding, because this was the first time we did it, so we had the team go out, get, you know, a lot of feedback, you know, extensive stakeholder outreach, you know, and then look at what are the key issues, what are the key needs, and then what are the strategies to really be able to address the needs and challenges we've identified. And then, you know, right now the team is really looking at how do we align here the needs, and then we have all of the strategies, how do we align it, but then also how do we lay out, you know, a strategy and an implementation strategy to address those. So quick example here, I won't read through this, but I'll just highlight that, you know, on the left-hand side, you have, you know, what the category is, sustaining current services. It's really, really important that we maximize, but also make what we have today very efficient. I know DART, you know, my friends at DART really focusing on modernizing DART, making it cleaner, making it safer, making it, you know, much more efficient, so the people that are using it today are happy with what they're using, you know. And then responding to growth, I mentioned, so we have existing, how do we expand and build a system to be able to respond to the growth that we just mentioned earlier, that Texas continues to grow. 1,500 people move to Texas every day. I think this region I heard last week is about 400 people move into the DFW region every day. So again, huge population growth. We're not going to be able to move it just by one mode. So really thinking about how can transit be part of that toolbox that helps us to address, you know, the continued demographic growth, but also the economic growth, because economic growth drives population growth. People will not come to Texas if there were no jobs. People will not come to Texas if there were no economic opportunities. I tell you. You know, you see other states that are losing population because they are not growing, they're not providing economic opportunity. And then really a huge need that came through the transit plan is inner city and interregional connectivity. Again, we're zeroing on the Texas Triangle. How do we improve connectivity between the 5 metro regions of the state? Where again, we're spending a lot of money to address highway needs, which is important. But also how do we diversify what our transportation network looks like? And then planning and design, a key component that came out of this plan so far is a lot of the planning and design, especially on the highway side, doesn't take consideration of transit. I mentioned buses operate on highways, but if we're not planning and ensuring that we have, stops and stop signs or pullover for those buses, it becomes a big issue when we're doing construction. Construction zones on some of these corridors, are we ensuring that we're accommodating a transit bus? And are we accommodating the users of the system? So how do we integrate that early in the process? How do we identify those corridors and maybe put a transit overlay in those corridors so that we ensure that those buses can operate efficiently, but also safely, especially for the pedestrians that are using that? Funding, of course, a big issue. Our legislators do give us funding, but it's very limited. They do not provide any funding to the DARTs and to the MTAs, what we call the MTAs. They do not provide. Most of the funding we get from the legislators go to the urban, small urban and rural transit operators. And then, as you see here, we got strategies to address all of this, and then justifying that. So, big deal when it came to stakeholder outreach, and this is just by the numbers. What the team did was they created a steering committee that really engaged a lot of the folks throughout the state, but also they had a lot of working groups, that really focus on different themes, and you can see a lot of meetings, and the number of stakeholders we engage has been really astronomical, and the interest in addressing transit. Again, it's not just urban issues, rural areas, border regions, you name it. Even in West Texas, a lot of the folks that work in the oil field, we heard a lot of need for transit to be able to get to those jobs. Otherwise, they have some of those locations have informal transit providers that shuttle people from their locations. What we heard, again, just summarizing this, service and connectivity, focusing on the need for more hours, not less, because people are working different hours, shift workers, all of that, need for more hours, more service, and greater connectivity between the modes. And then facilities. I mentioned DOT is really doing a big modernization of their facilities, of the system. How do we improve the look and feel of the facilities that people are using? And then funding is a big deal moving forward, in order to be able to expand and address transit. Again, summarizing a lot of the groundwork that went, because again, this was the first time we were doing this, so we wanted to make sure we had broad outreach as much as possible throughout the state, because the state of Texas is very diverse. It's not one size fits all. What we hear in El Paso is not the same as what we hear in Dallas or what we hear in Laredo. It's not the same thing as what we hear in Lufkin. And then, just really succinctly increase funding for transit, expand passenger rail. We heard that loud and clear everywhere we went, people really desiring to have passenger rail, not necessarily high speed, but passenger rail that they can be able to take. Then connectivity between rural and urban areas. And when I say this, it's not necessarily connecting Dallas-Fort Worth to, let's say, Midland, Odessa. Is you're in Denton County, how do you connect the folks that live in the rural part of Denton County to downtown or to the jobs in the parts of that county? So that's kind of the rural and urban connectivity that we're talking about, but also it's the kind of connecting, let's say you're gonna connect Waco to Austin. And then here's just showing some of the initial priorities, that identified, and moving forward as we finalize, the plan is now in the draft form. As we finalize, the plan definitely will be going out later this summer, early this summer, to kind of tie the bow and do a testing of, okay, did we capture what you told us? Did we capture the needs? Did we capture the strategies? Have we laid it in a way that can be useful in terms of moving forward to set Texas in a way that, even if we don't get funding today, Can this be a strategy for 5 years from now? Can it be a strategy for 10 years from now? And I know we've been doing a lot of work. I tell people that transit rail existed in Texas in the 70s, and we got rid of it, okay? And can that come back? Again, it's going to take vision, it's going to take boldness to be able to address transit in the state, and I think a lot of you know that, but let me tell you, the tide can change. The ports spent 12 years, I think more, asking for funding to address Texas port needs. And last session it happened. So I think, telling the story, continuing to really be advocates for transit for this state is going to be key. All of you have a voice to be able to, advocate for that. Is just we need another tool in the toolbox that really helps facilitate Texas moving forward economically. So this is the process I mentioned. We started this effort in 2023, and we are now towards the tail end of this effort. And definitely we'll probably be releasing this sometimes in the fall of 2025, and be able to allow all the stakeholders to have access to that and use it to make a business case for transit. And that's it. It was a lot, but again, thank you all for the invitation and for allowing us to come share what we're doing at TxDOT. And again, we're not just highways, but also all the other modes as we share today, and we'll be happy to take any questions.